Hey everyone, welcome back to part 2 of my interview with Jennifer Elia. On the last episode, we talked about eliminating homeschool overwhelm that every homeschool mom faces. And we also talked about just the importance of finding support, both globally and locally in your homeschool. And so today, Jennifer is back with us again. Welcome back to the podcast, Jennifer.
Thank you. I'm glad to be back.
Yeah, I'm so glad to have you back. She is the founder of Sound Foundations Homeschool. She's a homeschool mom to 4 kiddos, and she has been a public school teacher and a college professor. She's got lots and lots of training under her belt. So she speaks from experience and also from just education herself and knowledge of having been a teacher. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things we kind of started talking about at the end of our last episode was we were talking about nurturing a love of learning in our kids. And I have found that to be one of the most important things that we do as homeschool parents, and also one of the hardest things that we do as parents, because we talked in the last episode about the gaps that we all feel like our kids have, and we kind of get this frantic, oh my goodness, our kids are going to have all these holes in their education, and what are we going to do? And you were talking about how it's important to teach them how to love learning, because everybody's going to have gaps in their education. But if they learn how to learn, then they can learn anything.
Yes.
And I've told this story actually before. I've told this story before on the podcast, but I grew up really hating school. I genuinely hated school. And I remember my senior year of high school, I just felt like, oh, thank the Lord, it's done. It's over. I never have to open up another book again. I enjoyed reading for fun, but I did not ever want to open up anything academic ever again in my whole life. And I just felt like, okay, I've checked off that box. I never have to learn anything again as long as I live. And I really wish, now I have a very different opinion about that and view of learning, of course. And now I enjoy learning as an adult, but I wish that I had grown up with a desire to learn and a love for learning things, because everything that we learn can and should point us towards our Creator and having a deeper relationship with Him. So I want to talk about the two things of, one, nurture, why we need to nurture that love of learning in our kids, and then 2, how do we accomplish doing that?
Yes. Well, the first thing is that, like I said in the last one, I love to do research. Like, that is a great passion of mine. I actually love writing research papers. But now that I'm out, most of what I do my research on is education or something like that. However, I was working for Global Learn Day for a while. And one of the things that they wanted me to find out about was preparing people to be lifelong learners, but also preparing them for getting out into the world and being productive adults. And so I really dove into that research. And what I found is that one of the top skills that employers want are people who can learn, like, know how to learn, and are willing to self-educate. So they're willing to keep learning, and they know how to take a topic and find out about it. And I realized that homeschooling really sets us up for that, because if you're in a brick and mortar school, you're checking off those boxes, and you're trying to get from first grade to second, and second to third, and pass this test and earn that certificate. And then in the end, it's considered like a completion, like you're done. But really, when you think about graduation, it's called a commencement, because it's supposed to be beginning the next chapter. And so it should never really end. So I think that when we're thinking about preparing our kids for launching them into the world and preparing them for, future ready careers, one of the biggest things that we can teach them beyond STEM or investing in expensive chemistry equipment or any of that is really how to learn, because the world that they're going to be living in is going to be completely different than what we're doing right now. And that's one thing that I've seen over and over again in these studies about STEM, is that the people that are high up in the technology are saying, listen, the coding you're teaching your kindergartners is not going to exist when they get out. So instead of focusing on that, focus on teaching them how to adapt and learn, and to love that, and also be creative in their learning. So you were saying, like, how do we start that? And I think really it's igniting that spark. When kids are really little, they get fascinated by something. So everyone has their little quirk that they love. Like we were talking earlier about, my oldest just loved Thomas the Tank, and she couldn't name every single engine that there was and tell you what they did and where they lived and what their number was and whatever. And so they did a study a few years ago about children, like young children, preschool and toddlers, and how they obsess on something. And people get upset because we're in this academic mindset that all they want to learn about is dinosaurs. But they found that when you let them dive into that, they become much better learners, and their brains develop much more productively than if you're exposing them to everything and trying to get them to, learn Spanish and know physics and all this other stuff that they're trying to teach preschoolers now. So I think that sometimes we need to step back from where we want them to go and see where they are, especially when they're young, and let them chase that passion a little bit. It's hard to do as moms, as homeschool moms, because we worry, well, if they only want to, like my oldest loves horses, if they only want to learn about horses, then, where does chemistry and algebra fit in? And that will come, but you need to nurture that passion within them and let them dive into it. And as they learn how to dive into their passion, they're going to keep reading and learning and studying. And that kind of sets them on the path of understanding how to learn. So now when a new problem comes up, they can go about it to problem solve through it.
Right. I want to take a break. And then when we come back, can we give some very practical ways to do that with kids? And I want to talk about kids with maybe some different learning styles and how that would work with them.
Okay.
Sound good? Okay. Yes. Let's take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Okay.
We are back with Jennifer again, and we're talking about nurturing a love for learning in our kids. And what I want to talk about specifically is every kid has every one of us is made with a different bent, a different learning style, a different personality type. And so as far as learning styles, you've got those who are kinesthetic, those who are visual, those who are auditory. I know the list can go on and on with those, but those would be the three basics. And then you have different personality types as far as you've got the introverts and the extroverts and those who kind of fall in between. And so can we talk a little bit about, and maybe kind of break that up into the different learning styles and personality traits that kids have and how we can foster that love for learning in those kids. So how do you want to go one by one? I don't know.
I guess.
I did not prepare you for this. I'm sorry.
Well, I think in general that learning styles are often discounted. When I was in public school, there was this whole differentiation of lessons. And so you needed to try to touch all the learning styles so that you were reaching everybody. But I think sometimes we're afraid to foster that learning style that our child was born with. So we worry that if, for instance, for a kinesthetic learner, if we have them do everything physically, so like when they're learning their times tables, if they are, multiplying like how far they ran, so like we have them run and then they multiply that out. Or if they are hopping up and down to learn how to count, or they are physically moving things from one place to another, like the All About Spelling where you move things. There's many different versions of that. But we worry that if we just focus on that, then they won't learn how to learn. But in fact, like we're nurturing their gift. And I think that one big thing that's essential to fostering that love of learning is nurturing their gift and how they learn. Because while they need to be exposed to everything in life, you'll be exposed to auditory and visual if you're a kinesthetic learner. So if the best way for you to learn fractions is by cooking, making cookies, it's much better for you to learn how to do that than to struggle through it in a workbook, because you're not going to get as much out of it. And that's not like really a detriment. So I would say overall, like be willing to step back and see how your child learns, and be willing to foster that her love of learning. So if you want to go one by one and think of some ways to do that. So if we already started with kinesthetic, with kinesthetic, anything that is physical, like, and it doesn't have to be like outside physical, like running around climbing monkey bars, although that is very helpful. It can just be like moving things. So instead of drawing a line from one side to the other, you're physically moving things from one container to another, or you are, using marbles to count instead of tally marks. Just simple things like that, cooking. Really, any of those practical skills can be transformed into a lesson, because there's so much math and science and creativity and everything we need to do in everyday life that we often discount. Even doing the laundry, you need to balance it, right? And you need to sort the colors, and you need to decide which temperature and what are the temperatures going to do to this kind of clothing. So everything can be a learning opportunity. It's not that you need to spend a day learning how to do laundry, but for that kinesthetic learner, it's something that they can get their hands on and their minds around to learn it. So I feel like sometimes kinesthetic is a little bit easier because it's easier to imagine, like you can see them doing it. At least for me it is. For auditory learners, we really discount auditory learners, I have to say, because we are so focused on like the visual reading and doing work in workbooks and tests and stuff, which is all visual. It's not auditory. And there's also been, again, a lot of people moving away from lectures or extended listening. However, that is a great skill for kids to have. And auditory learners need that. Like, they thrive on having all that rich information coming into them. So audiobooks, podcasts, lectures, they're going to get so much out of that. Yes, it seems like they're just passively sitting there not doing anything, but that is what feeds their soul and gets them excited. Right. And so I really, my kids are audiobook junkies, and I've had people say to me, but don't you make them read books? And they're voracious readers. My younger two don't read yet, but they will sit and listen to audiobooks for hours. And I always say, if you can read with your fingers, why can't you read with your ears? It's the same thing. Yeah. So they are devouring this literature. I'd rather have them do that than not read anything because they're frustrated.
Right. And Andrew Pudewa would agree with you. We've talked with him about that on the podcast and in the movie.
This is why I love Andrew so much. Yes. I always say that he's my homeschool heartthrob, because
well, you're not the only one, I'm sure.
Yes. My husband teases me that I'm a groupie. But anyway.
As long as you don't have posters of him up on your living room wall or your bedroom.
But I always hear his voice in my head when I get stuck. Yeah. And I'm like, okay.
We should get bracelets that say, what would Andrew do?
What would Andrew do? Yes. He'd just read a book or turn on the
He would just read a book. He would listen to. Did you know, actually, that he'll talk about reading books himself, books that he's reading, and almost every book that he reads, he actually listens to. He does almost all audiobooks himself.
Yes.
And that's amazing. I mean, you look at someone like him who's so well-versed and well-educated, and he speaks on this a lot. And he himself is an audio book guy. He's an auditory learner. And so he's a musician, of course, so that makes sense. But that's how he enjoys reading, is through audio. Yes, and it's the same story, really. No matter how, it's the same as like reading a play versus seeing a play. Sure. It's the same thing. You're still reading Shakespeare. So then the last one would be the visual learner. And these are people that might actually thrive on workbooks, but you really don't want to get stuck in workbooks. So you want them to have a way to not only express themselves visually, but to receive information visually. So really engaging books with lots of pictures, encyclopedias, you don't want watered down with pictures, but there are some wonderful, my boys are really into animals, and they have some, volumes that are like this thick with beautiful photographs and tons of information, but the photographs are really just so engaging that it pulls you in, and that even if you can't read the text or you can't get everything, you're getting information from that. So like infographics would be another thing. If you're looking, they would probably
visual learners would probably love to make up an infographic too. PowerPoint presentations, things like that are engaging their eyes and getting them thinking.
Yep. And I think I find of most curriculums that are out there today, or I should say curricula out there today, I feel like people are doing a better and better job of creating their text to meet the needs of all of these different learning styles. And so they'll have, the reading portion of it, but then they'll have activities that go along with it, which are great for both of those. And as mom, you can read to your children so that they're not having to sit there and read on their own. And in reality, it's going to be much, much better learned when mom reads it out loud. So then they're getting that auditory as well as the visual if they're following along with you. But then mom typically will read it correctly, where the kids oftentimes will not. They'll skip words, they'll mispronounce words. I almost said mispronunciate. Don't know where that came from. They will mispronounce words. And so it really is, and again, we talked about reading in the first episode to your kids. And so that's just a great way for them to get that auditory learning. But then mom, is sitting there with them and you're still building that relationship and being able to read the texts with them. And that's aside from just fun books and great literature that we get to read with our kids. Let's talk very quickly about the two different personalities. Well, I guess it would be really three, because you've got the introverts, the extroverts, and then those who kind of fall in the middle, and helping to nurture that love of learning in kids with different personality styles.
Yes. So I have kind of a mix in my family, and I am most definitely an introvert. Most of my children are extroverts, though. But I realized that when I try to do group learning with them, it's harder on some than others. And so we need to kind of limit what we do together. However, my extroverts need that interaction. So they, like my son thrives on, he has a Zoom-based Spanish class. And that's like his favorite class ever, because he can see people and he can talk to them. And so he has a science co-op that he goes to, and we do a fine arts co-op. So they're kind of like, they need that constant stimulation of joining things. And one thing that I've realized is that sometimes we get into that habit of joining everything because we want our kids to be socialized and make sure that they're meeting enough people.
Right.
For some children, that's very painful, though. So for my extroverts, I need to find a balance, though. And so what I do is I let them join things that are going to teach them what I want them, what they need to learn. And then we fill in the gaps. So we're not like, when they go to science co-op, we don't do science elsewhere. This way we have time for other things. And so that gives me enough time to bring them there and let them experience that without feeling like we're constantly behind.
Right.
And the same with like they're in 4-H and they do presentations and research and whatever. So I count that towards their language arts and take that out of the language arts. So that gives us time to participate in 4-H. So I think that is an important balance. If you have an extrovert, if sometimes not to get caught up in trying to get them out there so much and then trying to keep up with work, find a way that you can use what they're doing out there to take away from what you need to do, like in books at home.
Right.
And find outlets online. For an introvert, I think you still need to get them out there. You don't, but I don't think that we need to push kids to do things that they don't necessarily want to do all the time. I think, though, that there is a place where you have to be, you need to learn how to live in the world. So we're going to we have Book Report Club quarterly, where the kids go and present a book report to our group, and then they sit and listen to all the book reports. And so for my one child, that's a painful experience, but this is part of what we do, and so it's only quarterly, and the rest of the time I let it go. So finding strategic ways to give that little taste of having to be in front of people to get over the fear of it, at least, without overburdening them with having to be somebody that they're not.
Yeah.
And then providing quiet study, I know an online course was just not in the cards for that child.
Yeah.
So providing a more quiet lots of reading and journaling and stuff, and supporting that. That is
Sure.
valid learning, just as, doing public presentations is. It's the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Great advice. Great advice. We are out of time. But I would love it if you would come back. We, most people know we have the Backstage Pass membership site. And one of the things I really want to talk to you about is you talk about 10 easy ways to transform your homeschool and home.
Yes.
Will you stay on with me for an extended version for our Backstage Pass members? And can we talk about that with them?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. Sounds awesome. So thank you guys for listening today. If you are a Backstage Pass member, you can go on Backstage Pass membership site, and we will continue this conversation with Jennifer talking about 10 easy ways to transform your home and homeschool and home. And if you are not a Backstage Pass member, go on schoolhouserocked.com and just click on Backstage Pass, and you can get information on that. And there are some great resources on there. That is a really fantastic way to support the ministry of Schoolhouse Rocked, the podcast, the movie, the blog, social media, everything that we have going on here, and get some great behind the scenes footage from the movie. Just great encouragement on there. We have lots of podcast interviews on there and extended versions from the podcast, but we also have many of the actual interviews from the Schoolhouse Rocked movie on there, people's full interviews. And so you'll have access to all of that stuff. And we have a lot more stuff that's coming on Backstage Pass membership site. So we would love for you to join us there as well. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you, Jennifer. Where can people find out more about you?
You can find me on the Sound Foundations Homeschool.com and Facebook and Pinterest at Sound Foundations Homeschool.
Okay, great. We'll link those in the show notes. And you guys have a great, great day, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.